Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're thrilled to have you joining us today for IFAI Virtual Expo 2020. My name is Aaron Monson, and I am the Education and Events Manager at IFAI. I'll be helping to host this session as part of Virtual Expo's sponsored education. Our session today is titled Demystifying Flame Retardant Specifications, Standards and Testing for Architectural Shade Fabrics, and is brought to you by Andrew Nasarchek, Senior Director of R&D at Gale Pacific. Andrew is joining us today all the way from Australia, where it's Friday morning. This session has been generously sponsored by Gale Pacific. We, of course, are very grateful for Gale Pacific's support and partnership. You can visit their exhibit booth in Classic Hall 1 by clicking on the exhibits button on the virtual events main navigation menu and scrolling down to Classic Hall 1. As everyone is likely aware, many of us are still working from home. We thank you for bearing with us in the event of any technical challenges that may unexpectedly occur. And as a reminder, 48 hours or so after our session concludes, it will be available to watch on demand throughout the rest of Virtual Expo and 30 days after Expo concludes. You can find it in our Virtual Event Places Education Auditorium in the same location you accessed our session today. Two more quick things. You'll have the opportunity to submit text questions by typing them into the Q&A box of your Zoom control panel. You can also use your chat box of the Zoom control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll address them at the end of the session. Lastly, a PDF version of today's session slides are available to you using the handouts link found in this session's page in our education auditorium. If you don't see a handout or for whatever reason can't access it, please let us know. We'll send it to you after the session. So with all of that said, I will now turn things over to Andrew to get us started.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Appreciate the introduction, and good morning and good evening, wherever in the world you may be. Thank you for the opportunity to present some of the really exciting things that Gale Pacific have been working through over the course of the last 12 months. We have put some deliberate focus around some of the flame retardant technologies, specifically around the knitted fabric developments and fabrics that Gale Pacific have been working on over the last few years. We see flame retardancy as becoming a very key area of interest and opportunities within the market more generally. And some of the work that we've been putting through the rigors of our R&D department and have now successfully launched to the marketplace provides us an opportunity to share some of that information with you this evening. It's also pretty important just to understand what we mean by flame retardancy. There are a lot of terms used out in the industry about flame retardants and what they actually are. So what we're trying to do through this presentation is also try to help people understand what flame retardancy actually means and how does that apply to a HDPE knitted shade fabric. So with regards to the agenda, I'm just going to scroll through to the next slide. Oh, this is not a great start. Aaron, has that next slide come through? Well, hopefully it's come through now.
Yeah, there's a little bit of lag, but it did come through.
Okay, terrific. So today's agenda is all about just giving you a brief introduction about Gale Pacific. Then we're going to talk a little bit around why flame retardant fabrics are important and what we're trying to achieve with these flame retardant fabrics. What is a flame retardant and how Gale Pacific have approached flame retardancy. And then we're just going to have an overview of the flame retardant range that Gale Pacific has launched through this calendar year. And as mentioned by Aaron, it'd be great if you had any questions through the presentation, if you could note them down, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. So just a very quick overview as to an introduction to Gale Pacific, those of you who aren't so familiar with Gale Pacific and who we are. As you may well appreciate, we are an Australian company by heritage, but we are a global company now with regards to our footprint. We've got locations both in Orlando and in Fontana, in Orlando, Florida, and Fontana, California. We're certainly servicing both consumer and commercial markets within the US region, as we do within other global regions, including Australia, the Middle East, and Eurasia, so Europe and Asia as well. So we're a headquartered company here in Melbourne, Australia, where I'm based. We are vertically integrated from a manufacturing standpoint. We've got one of the largest shade manufacturing plants in the world based in Ningbo, China, where we're producing knitted fabrics for a broad range of industries, including the commercial shade industry, which is the large part of the presentation that we're going to talk about today. One of the key features or benefits of Gale Pacific is that we've been in this shade market for longer than most other companies. We pioneered, invented shade fabrics back in 1976. So we'd like to consider ourselves as market leaders in this space, and we really want to continue innovating, developing, and challenging the market with some new developments that we're continuing to roll through the marketplace. As I mentioned, we are based in, our manufacturing is based in China, but we do have significant footprints in the US market, which helps services North America predominantly for us. So we've got a 150,000 square foot facility in Fontana, California, and that's all serviced from our manufacturing facility out of China. It's an area where we're continuing to invest additional capacity and resource into. As we develop these new products, as we continue to grow our range of products, we are supporting that growth with the infrastructure associated with those developments. So our plant in China is growing, as are our infrastructure facilities around the world. So let's move on to the shade fabric side of things. Why Gale Pacific putting such focus on shade fabrics? If you wound the clock back only as recently as 12 months ago, we had a very limited range of shade fabrics, and in the last 12 months, we've effectively launched 50 shade fabrics into the marketplace. So we're seeing a very distinct trend of flame retardancy requirements in a lot of regions, actually. The US region is a very key one for us, but we're seeing it also on the back of some terrible fire seasons here in Australia, and we're seeing it in some of the other jurisdictions and regions we're playing in. The Middle East is another example of that, and the reason for that is because there have been incidents fairly recently around fires associated with infrastructure and structures and construction of buildings. The photo actually in this slide is an actual image of a fire in Sydney, Australia, where that's a scaffold mesh, but it's representative of the types of challenges some of the construction industry has around using a material which is fairly combustible in an environment where it can be subjected to sparks or embers or whatever it might be on a fairly regular basis. So in the context of a school or a public area, there are increasing awareness around putting some requirements to prevent something like that happening. There's a few reasons for it. There's the insurance side of maintenance and upkeep of these structures. There's also the safety aspect of it as well. So what we're trying to do is improve the performance of our shade materials in environments where it can provide specifically safety and safety for people or infrastructure around that structure. And also it helps with some of the defensibility around the litigious side of installing some of these structures. So it provides engineers with that peace of mind. It provides the installers and manufacturers of those shade fabrics with the peace of mind that a fabric's going to be significantly safer for a lot of those applications. So having discussions with various architects, specifiers, installers, and end users. So across all the market streams, we are regularly told that this is an area for us to put some focus on, which is why Gale Pacific has gone down this path. So the question is, what is a flame retardant? And what does it actually mean in the context of a knitted shade fabric? So in effect, what a flame retardant is, the name effectively says it all. It retards the propagation of a flame. It's pretty important just to point out that we're talking about a technology that does not render that product non-combustible. So whilst we are slowing down that flame, we are not preventing that material ultimately from burning, and we're certainly not improving on the inherent characteristics of that polyethylene. So polyethylene is a great product. It's got inherently very good strength and mechanical performance and UV durability and some of the really good properties of required to produce a shade fabric. But it will melt when subjected to high heat, and putting a flame retardant additive in that product won't affect that at all. So you put a flame next to it or a high source of temperature, the inherent properties of the polyethylene will effectively still kick in, and it will melt and shrivel away from the flame. So that doesn't really change. What the flame retardant additive does is it assists with lifting what's called a limiting oxygen index. So it assists with making that flame more difficult to propagate. And what that then does is, hopefully once that flame source is removed, or the fabric has shrunk far enough away from that flame source, it will self-extinguish reasonably quickly. So it retards the propagation of the flame. So what that does in effect then, it limits damage within that structure. So you may get a small burn hole within that structure rather than the whole structure going up. It also prevents the propagation of that flame. So it stops that structure being part of an additional fuel source that then travels the flame into surrounding areas, be it around a house or in a school area or wherever that may be. So it performs a function of effectively trying to slow down that flame to a point where that flame will self-extinguish, to help preserve the properties of that fabric. There's a few ways of actually achieving a flame retardant finish onto a fabric. The less common approach, and certainly an approach that we would not be recommending for a polyethylene monofilament / tape fabric, would be a topical treatment. That treatment is quite effective in fibers that are inherently more porous. So if it's more of a multi-filament fiber, or such as an acrylic or a polyester type fiber, which can absorb liquids a little bit easier, then this approach is more relevant. But what we have found with fibers such as the monofilament tapes used in our knitted shade HDPE fabrics, it's very, very hard to get a good bond of that topical treatment onto the fabric. And whilst it might be there for a short period of time, we know from the fact that our fabrics are expected to last for long periods of time outdoors, that are subjected to a huge amounts of weather, specifically rain, it could be hail, snow, certainly wind. Over time, we question how long that surface finish will actually last, and we expect that to eventually wash out, and that will obviously then impact on the inherent flame retardant properties. So the other approach here is to inherently add that flame retardant whilst that fiber is being manufactured. And that's effectively the approach that Gale Pacific has taken. So we take a flame retardant additive that is converted into what's classed as a master batch, as we do with our pigments and UV stabilizers. So we're getting all of our raw material additives, blending them together with the polyethylene prior to extrusion, prior to spinning those fibers, and then inherently adding those additives, which help lock those additives in. So over time, we don't expect the performance characteristics of our products to deteriorate significantly, so we can get to the warranty periods that we're providing our fabrics. So I mentioned before that the flame retardant actually just retards that propagation of the flame, and how it works. It's certainly from a Gale perspective, if we're talking about how our flame retardant technology works, what happens is by applying the heat of a flame, what will happen is the flame retardant additives will release will create a chemical reaction. It releases certain atoms or chemicals that will help quench that flame. So what you require to propagate a flame, I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with this. You need three key variables. You need the oxygen, you need the heat, and you need the fuel source. So the fuel source is effectively a given because that fuel source is in effect that shade fabric. The heat will be a given too. So if there's a direct flame being applied to that fabric, that is a constant. So the only real variable that we can manipulate is oxygen. And what we do by incorporating these flame retardant additives is you actually start creating a barrier of oxygen. So that in effect slows down or extinguishes that flame because there's not enough oxygen around that flame to propagate it. And that's in effect how flame retardants work, and certainly how the flame retardant system operates with the Gale fabric. But it only can work to a point, because if the heat source and or the fuel source become overwhelming, that quenching process has a limitation. So it does work to a degree for many a flame, but if the flame is an overwhelming bushfire or whatever that flame source may be, then there will be a point where that mechanism won't be able to cope. So it's just a matter of calling that out so people are aware that just because it's flame retardant doesn't necessarily mean it cannot burn. It still can, but it's going to be a lot more difficult to burn than what would be considered a non-flame retardant product. I'm going to give you an example of how the flame retardant actually works in the context of an actual test. So I've got a video here. I just want to talk to this video very quickly before I display it on the screen. So this is just a demonstration video. It's an internal test that we do at Gale. It does not represent a proper standard. The purpose of this video is really just to demonstrate the mechanism of how a flame retardant works. And what expectations we've got, and more generally, people should have around a flame retardant fabric and its performance. So let's see if this video can come up. So we've got a flame source here. We've got our flame retardant fabric. You can see there that there's a flame that actually starts propagating within the fabric. But what happens is the fabric's shrinking and it's melting, as I described. But what we ideally expect to see, and that's the best case scenario for us, the flame as it propagates onto the fabric is immediately extinguished. So we can't prevent that shrinkage, we can't prevent that melting, but what we can prevent is that propagation of flame. If that was a non-flame retardant fabric, once that fabric starts getting a fuel source onto it, or that flame attached to the fabric, that flame will propagate, and eventually that whole material will disappear into thin air. Just it will all burn. So that's how the flame retardants work. I'll just play that one more time. So fabric shrinking, we've got a flame, but the flame is extinguishing. So in the context of a lot of tests that happen, you wouldn't typically move that flame to chase that fabric. So the flame is fixed, the fabric's fixed. But so this is in effect a little bit more severe because we're trying to chase that shrinkage within the fabric. But we'll talk to the standards that are more broadly used very, very shortly. Well, that's enough of that one. So a very important consideration, apart from the fact is that we're chasing flame retardancy, is also keeping in mind the other important feature that shade fabrics are designed to perform, and that's UV durability. And this is a key technical challenge for fabric manufacturers such as Gale. Is one thing to get the flame retardancy performance, and there are numerous technologies available to achieve that. But it's another thing to get the flame retardancy performance along with UV stabilization and pigment performance as well. A key challenge there is from a chemistry perspective is that, broadly speaking, flame retardants, UV stabilizers don't like each other. Just the mechanism of that flame retardant is almost the opposite of the mechanism of a UV stabilizer. So what happens when you blend them together is that they become quite antagonistic, and they want to fight each other, so to speak. So you need to be very, very careful in the selection of both the flame retardants and UV stabilizers from a formulation perspective to ensure that we can maintain the durability and the long-term life of that fabric too. And there's certain ways that other companies go about this. One of the ways that we know companies do approach it is they would use a black thread through the flame where the flame retardant additive is incorporated, and that's a way of doing it, because the black pigment in its own right has got very, very good UV absorption characteristics, so it can act very much as the UV stabilizer, and that black pigment, or the carbon black within the black and a flame retardant, aren't so bad working together. But once you want to put some vibrancy in terms of that fabric, so you want to add some colors and move away from that black system, you've got to be very selective on the UV systems that you use. So we've done a mountain of work around trying to find that right combination. And in addition to a lot of the flame retardancy tests that we do, we also do a huge amount of simulation of UV exposure. So we've used both QUV. For those who are familiar with QUV, it's a UVA exposure, and it's at 340 nanometers of wavelength. And we subject our fabrics to thousands and thousands of hours in those UV chambers, which Gale has internally, just to ensure that there was no obvious signs of UV degradation and or color fade. And talking about color fade, we also do some work around xenon arc testing as well. And I've got some results that I'll show you a little bit later through this presentation. So we've gone about taking that base flame retardant technology, and we've adapted it to the largest portfolio of flame retardant fabrics in a knitted space currently available around the globe. So I mentioned before, we've got 35 unique colors that we've developed across 3 product ranges to give us a total of 50 variants. So, and they all launched this year. So January, February, and June. Wasn't the best year to launch a brand new range or portfolio of products. It's been difficult communicating some of this through some of the macroeconomic constraints we've had. So it's a great opportunity for us to share some of this information with you today, just to give you an idea of some of this work that's occurring, because we certainly are seeing some traction already occurring in the marketplace with these ranges, and we believe that, as I mentioned at the outset, that as trends continue the way they are, that there will be continued interest and growth in this market space. So one of the key call outs for our flame retardant range is that we've tried as much as we practically can to match it against the non-flame retardant range. So from an end user standpoint, there's no compromises. They want our desert sand in our commercial heavy or our commercial 95. They can have that offer in a flame retardant or a non-flame retardant, and that applies across the range. So the aesthetics and the color match have been a huge challenge for us, because flame retardants also create another challenge in that they can impact on color. Flame retardants inherently have got this opaqueness to them, and quite a milky type color, and adding that into a base pigment will skew that pigment considerably. So we've had to make some significant adjustments in the base pigment technology as well to be able to adapt to that. So that all has been done to provide our customers and end users a seamless choice really between our range. So as I mentioned today, if you want a flame retardant product, you can get that flame retardant product aligned with a non-flame retardant product within the Gale commercial range. So no longer do we need to make compromises around the color and performance of our fabrics. So we'll move now to the compliance side of it. So this is another area that we've had to put a bit of work around just to get our heads around what it actually all is. You probably have heard around some of the terminologies of this California State Fire Marshal and the NFPA test, as well as various ASTM methodologies, and more broadly from a global perspective, there are European standards and requirements, as well as from an Australian perspective, we've got a set of Australian standards as well we need to work towards. So it's really a challenge for a manufacturer is because a lot of different jurisdictions have got different requirements around flame retardancy, and of course there's no two flame retardancy tests are the same. There is differences in the way that the tests are carried out, differences in the ways the performance characteristics are measured. So from a manufacturer's perspective, it creates some challenges for us in understanding what those requirements are from the outset, and then obviously ensuring that a material that we have developed will actually conform to those requirements. And we're really, really excited and pleased to say that our fabric range complies to an extremely broad range of flame retardant standards. And the CSFM standard, California State Fire Marshal standard, and the NFPA also, I think it's important to call out here, is that the standard themselves only really requires the one color or that one product that is deemed to be representative of that whole range to be tested, which is fine if you can guarantee there's consistency of that one product across the full breadth of that range. But we, as Gulf Pacific, we didn't want to just rely on that one test. So we've had a pretty comprehensive view of how we're going to approach this flame retardancy challenge, and we've tested the whole range. So every single color we've put through the rigor of the CSFM State Color Fire Marshal, and then of course you take all those results and you can take one of those results to get the official registration or certification. But certainly, if any of you are interested in looking at that breadth of results and testing that we've done, that they're certainly available to be provided to any of our customers. In addition to that, you've got the NFPA, and the NFPA is actually quite an interesting test. We're talking specifically about the 701-1 and 701-2. So for those of you who don't have that familiarity between the two tests, the 701-1 is more of a small scale test versus the large scale test of the 701-2. My apologies. And our shade fabrics actually are somewhere in the middle. We're probably a 701-15, but that standard, of course, doesn't exist. So the small scale test is more aligned to indoor upholstery, curtains, blinds, lighter weight fabrics, and the test is geared very much towards that style of fabric. Whereas the -2 is the large scale for banners and blockout and membranes and tent materials that are specifically 700 grams per square meter and heavier. So our fabrics are lighter than that weight, but more attuned to being used in those types of applications. So again, as a manufacturer, we're not sure whether we should be playing in that 1-1 space or that -2 space. So effectively, we've gone, well, let's just do both. And that's what we've done. We've taken the challenge of testing both the -1 and the -2. And once again, we've done the whole range. We've got every single color tested across the three ranges we've launched. So gives us very much the confidence and peace of mind of knowing that regardless of what color you take, regardless of what style of product you take, you can be rest assured that that's been tested and compliant to that specific standard. And finally, you've got the ASTM E84. ASTM E84, in general terms, is not as stringent a test as the NFPA nor the CSFM. And as most of you are probably aware, you end up getting a three-class system: a Class A, a Class B, and a Class C. And in many cases, and a lot of our fabrics and just the nature of our fabrics will comply as a Class A, and that also includes some of the non-flame retardant products. So, which is why we generally would deem that standard to be a less stringent standard than the previous two standards we worked through. Some of the European standards are quite challenging too, and the European industry is largely geared towards the PVC style of market. So the products and the applications are very much around the PVC market. So some of the M1 ratings and the B ratings you've got from the DIN or the German standard and the French standards can create some challenges too. And one of the overarching challenges there too is you don't necessarily get a binary pass fail. You'll get a rating. And then it's up to an engineer or specifier to understand or adapt that rating to an application. The same applies with an Australian standard. Australian standards, you'll get flammability indexes, or smoke evolved or heat evolved index, and you just get a rating. You don't get a specific pass-fail criteria. So that, once again, is incumbent on an engineer or a specifier to interpret those results to determine whether that product is fit for purpose. So just in summary, we've taken the approach that we want to have the highest level of safety and confidence available in the marketplace, tested all of our fabrics, every single color, to some of the most stringent standards. We've got all those results. So again, if there's any requirement from a customer, we're certainly happy to work with you in providing those results as required. I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges we've got. So the Australian standard, French, sorry, the ASTM, the German, the French, and to a degree the Australian standards are all gradings and classifications, so they do have some ambiguity associated with them. The more binary tests are the NFPA and the CSFMs. You either get a pass or a fail, and as I mentioned, there are certain criteria that need to be achieved to get a pass or a fail, and each one of those tests have got their own set of specifications. That might be after flame time, it might be dripping time, it might be shrinkage or char length. So that they all present challenges, particularly when you're talking about a material which is polyethylene based. So polyethylene inherently has got a degree of flammability associated with it. So that flame retardancy just has to work really, really hard to protect that polyethylene as much as it possibly can to ensure we have compliance. And as I demonstrated in that video, we get the flame onto the fabric, and the ideal scenario for us is that fabric will self-extinguish as quickly as it possibly can, ideally whilst the flame is there, but certainly as soon as the flame is removed, there should be no after flame. That should basically immediately self-extinguish when a heat source is removed. Each region is different. You go through, different jurisdictions. You go through the Asian region; they've got their own flame retardancy standards. You go through as Europe, US, Australia, Middle East, but we find that there are some key consistencies or key tests that are broadly recognized in other jurisdictions. So we do find that the Americans test standards, the NFPA 701 and the CSFM are globally recognized tests. To a degree, the Australian standard is too, and also I think to a degree that the European standards are as well. And certain parts of the world will recognize a European standard or American standard. So, which is why we're largely focused on those key tests. Otherwise, we'll end up just having to test literally hundreds of different standards, and it becomes a little bit cumbersome for fabric manufacturers to have that breadth and depth of testing conducted. But if there are certain specifications that are required for certain applications, certainly feel free to reach out to Gail. We can have a chat to you about that. I mentioned earlier that apart from the flame retardancy, we've got to have that key consideration around UV durability and color fastness. So we've taken the approach of doing accelerated UV testing. We've also taken the approach of doing some Z-on-arc testing. And Z-on-arc testing generally is a better test for representation of color fastness. QUV testing is generally a better representation of measuring UV degradation. So we're just showing you some color fastness tests here because that's a lot easier to demonstrate through a presentation. You can see some test samples here that have actually gone through the Z-on-arc test, and these we've done every single color, but we're just giving you a bit of a representation across some of the color palette that we've got. And as I'm sure a lot of you would appreciate, some of the more challenging colors from a color fastness perspective are the brighter colors. So we've got the yellow, the green, and the red. Even in a non-flame retardant variant, they can be challenging to get very high levels of color fastness on. And we're really pleased with these results. These results here would be representative of somewhere between 5 to 7 years outdoor exposure. And as you can see across the board, there's been very, very little color fade. If you look very carefully, and hopefully it's coming through your screens, you can see a very slight color change in some of the colors, but we would deem that degree of color change to be acceptable, particularly given the duration these fabrics have been exposed for in these xenon arc environment. I mentioned earlier that we've gone to a point where we've tried to match our fabrics as closely as we possibly can, and it creates, whilst it gives our market a wonderful opportunity to have a seamless transition between flame retardant and non-flame retardant product, it does create a bit of a challenge for our fabricator partners in trying to identify one versus the other. So Gale's taken the approach of labeling our products a little bit differently. So the end labels are very clearly labeled to be a flame retardant product. We've got some visual color differences there, so that calls it out. But we also know that some of our fabricator partners will take that beautiful roll of knitted fabric that's been nicely wrapped, they put it on the shelf, they'll take it off the shelf, and then they'll remove that label and or outer wrapper, and that might be disposed of. So then what do we do, or what will they do to ensure that they've got a flame retardant or a non-flame retardant product, depending on the application? So we've also incorporated an edge marker. And the reason why we do this is because of all the reasons I said at the outset. We're going down a path, and our customers therefore going down a path of getting a flame retardant product. It's important that to ensure that you actually are using that flame retardant product for the designated application. So it's been specified. We want to make sure that it is actually being used. The last thing any of us want is to have a flame retardant product which gets confused with a non-flame retardant product. That non-flame retardant product gets used, and there's a problem within the marketplace. So we're trying to make this process with our fabricator partners and end users as robust as possible to ensure that there is a very clear distinction, because sometimes it's very, very hard to see that visually within the fabric itself. So we're moving across now to the flame retardant range. Mentioned earlier, we've gone through that launch. We initially launched the commercial heavy 430 FR, very quickly transitioned to the dual shade 350 FR, and the most recent launch, which was just a few months ago, was the commercial 95 430 FR. So generally speaking, I'm sure a lot of the people on this call are familiar with the general range that Gale Pacific has got in the commercial knitted fabric space. Our commercial 95 has been the workhorse of the Gale Pacific range for many a decade now. And we've just taken that range and we've adapted an FR variant of it. The most recent development from a fabric perspective has been our dual shade, and it's been received terrifically in the marketplace generally. And we're seeing some really interesting installations with the dual shade across the globe, and we're really excited with the direction that product's going down and some of the opportunities it's providing the marketplace. So again, we've taken that base range and built out an FR range around it, and our more premium offer, which is for the larger span structures, for the monofilament fabric, the toughest, most stable fabric. We've taken that product first into the marketplace. That's where a lot of specification work lies, and that's where we see a huge amount of opportunity, specifically around flame retardancy too, with some of the schools and large public areas that require that strength, dimensional stability, robustness in fabric. That's why we thought that was a natural start for the flame retardancy range, and that's cascaded down through the broader range. So we've got our 16 vibrant colors in commercial 430 FR, commercial heavy 430 FR. Mono, as I mentioned, it's designed to be the most dimensionally stable fabric within our portfolio of products. Also designed to have that excellent vibrancy. We get, being a total monofilament fabric, we get really nice depth of color, and it's a fabric that is being very much specified in applications where requirements around durability and maintenance or lack of maintenance more specifically is required. Also, it's got quite a very unique characteristics in terms of abrasion resistance. So its ability to breathe and to shed water, being monofilament, is better than a monotape variant. And it's also backed by one of the best warranties in the industry. We've got a 15-year warranty on the non-FA range, and we've managed to develop it with a 12-year warranty with the flame retardant range. So there is a slight discrepancy, but still, it is a world-class warranty position for a flame retardant fabric. So I've already spoken about some of the key features and benefits. It's designed off the back of a patented knit pattern. So we do incorporate what we term as an intertwining thread, and that patented knit pattern is what gives us some of the very unique features and benefits that we can offer with the commercial heavy. That gives it the dimensional stability. That removes the requirement to have to tension the fabric so often. It increases the span width that can be used in some of those structures, and it also helps with some of the visual characteristics of the fabric. We've got a lot of this information on our website, so if you want to find any further information about our commercial heavy 430 range, feel free to reach out into the Gulf Pacific website. You can look at some of the imagery, some of the technical specifications, warranties. It's all on our website. Also, feel free to reach out to any of our Gale team globally, both in the Americas region, in ANZ region, wherever you might be. I'm sure our sales team will be more than happy to have a chat to you about the range and what we can offer in that space. I think just a point there too is if you're interested in finding out anything further specific about the range, about pricing, product availability, etc., please feel free to reach out to a Gale Pacific representative in your region. We've got the booth set up virtually on the back of this presentation, which I'm sure Aaron will get to as well. So feel free to drop a business card, feel free to drop in. I'll be available on our booth straight after this call. So if there are any questions that you wanted just to ask more personally, we'll be happy to take those questions on our booth straight after this call as well as having some of our sales team available to field any other commercial questions you may have. So the dual shade, this is our most exciting real innovation in terms of a knitted shade that we've been really proud to present to the market. And we launched this material about 12 to 18 months ago, and I'm pleased to say it's been very well received by the marketplace. And that aesthetic, the performance characteristics of the dual shade are very, very unique in its own right. And off the back of that design, function, aesthetic, feature, shimmer effect that you get off the fabric, we've developed a flame retardant range. So we've taken the existing color palette and we've adapted the flame retardancy once again. And we've done that again through a patented knit pattern, utilizing both an intertwining thread, but we've also got an additional patent in the way we've constructed that fabric to get that two-tone effect naturally within the fabric. So we've got the 12 colors, I think, that we've developed, we've developed those around various themes. So we've got our Brilliant collection, our Terra Firma collection, and our Destination collection. And the idea here is that we want to provide some inspiration to some design and architects and looking at specific applications where some of these different design or function colors can create some real interest in a specific application or design space. So again, we've found that in some of the sort of coastal, more Nordic themes, some of the destination colors have been really, really popular around schools and around playgrounds. The Brilliant collection's been really, really popular too, which is exactly how we thought it would be played out. And of course, the Terra Firma range is more for natural sort of installations or for specific themes that fabricators or end users are actually trying to create within that environment. So that's been received really well, and that flame retardant range is now available in a dual shade. So we've got the range that's been developed. we've got the the key features and benefits which remain of that dual shade. The shimmer effect, the dual shade effect hasn't been compromised at all by incorporating the flame retardant, and we've gone with the 10-year warranty. So we actually haven't compromised the warranty. Our non-flame retardant and flame retardant ranges have got the same warranty within dual shade. Once again, marketing collateral is available. Please feel free to look at our website and feel free to reach out to our Gulf Pacific team. And finally, Commercial 95. I'm sure it's a product that a lot of you are familiar with, been the workhorse of the architectural shade industry for many a decade now, continues to do so, continues to set the benchmark in performance requirements. We've taken that wonderful product and we've adapted the flame retardant range around it. We still find a lot of our competitors trying to copy the Commercial 95, and what we're trying to do is to set Commercial 95 even further ahead in terms of its performance characteristics. We've got 22 vibrant colors available, all solid or blends of colors. There's no black monofilament required here, so the same types of aesthetics you'll expect to get from our current range of COM 95, you'll be able to replicate with the flame retardant range as well. So huge amounts of UV block, very good strength characteristics, easy to work with, very reliable fabric. So these are some of the key features and benefits which we haven't compromised on. We've just provided that key benefits you already know and provided the additional benefit of flame retardancy. So that all of these ranges, I'll just reiterate, they've got the CSFM, NFPA, requisite European standards, Australian standards, all tested, conducted, every single color. So you can imagine how many tests we've done across the range to get to a point where we can start communicating some of these to yourselves. So we are very proud of the achievements we've made, and we're also really keen to start talking to you and help promoting some of these achievements in a marketplace more generally. So a 10-year warranty, again, we're matching our non-FR range with the FR range, and we back that as not just a pro rata warranty, it's a full warranty. So you have that peace of mind that over that 10-year period, if there's any problems with that product, you can come and talk to us about it, and we can obviously work through any challenges that you may be having, which we don't expect you to. I must reiterate. All the information's on our website. Feel free to reach out to us or have a look at our website, and we can have a chat to you about all the technical specs and any other specific requirements that you may have. So we're getting sort of to that point in time. I just reiterate one. We've got all these variants. We've got 50 shade fabric options, 3 architectural new ranges that have been developed, and we're all available from the one supplier, Gulf Pacific. So please feel free to drop into our booth. Feel free to reach out to us, and yeah, hopefully you found this presentation beneficial. We'll get to questions shortly. I just wanted also, before I close out, I've been reminded from our sales team to make sure you do drop into our booth. There is a promotion that we've got on the way at the moment. So we are giving away some AirPod Pros. So please feel free to drop your business card off to our booth, post this presentation, and that automatically gets you into the draw for these iPods. So I'll wrap it up there, and I'll hand it back to Aaron.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. You must have been incredibly thorough. I don't see any questions right now. But as Andrew mentioned, please feel free to stop by Gale Pacific's booth and take the conversation there, take your questions there if any should come up. I'll close things out with a minute or so of remarks here, so that'll give people the opportunity to ask any questions if anything should come up before we sign off. But yeah, there's still no questions, so just give folks a few seconds just in case someone's typing. Okay, well, with that said, then follow up with Andrew, follow up with Gale Pacific in their booth in Classic Hall 1 if you have any other any questions or any other comments that you want to add. So Thanks everyone for being here today. At the end of the day, for most of us here in the US, very special thank you to Andrew for leading our session early in the morning over there in Australia. As I have mentioned several times, and so did Andrew, if you have any other questions, visit Gale Pacific, visit their exhibitor booth found in Classic Hall 1. If you take a look at your chat window, you should have a link to a brief survey. We hope you'll take a few moments to complete that survey. Your honest feedback helps us to continue to provide quality content for all IFAI events. You can also check out some of the other exciting features and programming at IFAI's Virtual Expo. We have over 100 exhibiting companies to browse and network with. You can check out our Play and Demo Zone for on-demand product demo videos, access to some of our extracurricular activities there, morning yoga sessions. We have a live puppy cam. If you need a break and you just want to watch some puppies rolling around, it's pretty fun. And we also have about 50 hours of legacy webinar content there on our Play and Demo Zone for you to browse through. And then also for all things IFAI specific, you can check out our virtual hub located under the exhibits drop-down menu in our main lobby. And I still don't see any other questions coming, so I'll close it out. We hope you've all enjoyed this session. Another big thank you to Andrew Nazarchek from Gale Pacific and the entire team there. We look forward to engaging with you all during the rest of IFAI Virtual Expo 2020. Once again, my name is Aaron Monson, and I am the Education and Events Manager here at IFAI. Thanks again, everyone, and farewell.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.